theme, what it is and how to find it, because this is something that you'll be doing in this week's block. More importantly, we are going to go over 3 steps that you can use to find the theme, because sometimes finding theme can be a little confusing or a little tricky, and it's good if you have a process that you can go through. So the most important thing we need to cover first is, what is the theme? A theme primarily is some kind of a message. That message can be a moral of some kind, it can be a lesson, it can be an expression of a universal truth. So, what is a universal truth? A universal truth is something that is always true. It can be applied anywhere, anytime, to anyone, and it's always going to be true. We read stories because they have things in them that we can relate to. Those things are often the universal truths, or they're the message. The stories talk about something that we can at least relate to, even if we don't agree with it. We can follow it along, and it's telling us something about life. When we find those messages, that's when we have found the theme. That's what we're looking for. Okay, so in order to practice going through our 3-step process today, we are going to use a story. And the story that I have picked to use is Goldilocks and the 3 bears. This is a really simple story. Most everybody should have heard it. If you haven't, then you can always go on YouTube and look it up. I'm sure you can find a wonderful rendition, and then you will have perfect understanding of everything. But even without that, the story is simple enough that you should be able to follow along. So the first step in our process, once we've read a story, is we are going to identify the plot. Make sure that we know that we have said what the plot is. So just in review, although all of you should know this already, a plot is what happens in a story. The events of the story, what characters do, where they go, how they feel, what they do about it. So if we're looking at a story like Goldilocks and the 3 Bears, a simple way that we could summarize the plot would be, we could say, a girl goes into a stranger's house. She's just off walking in the woods. And while she's there, she eats things, all of their porridge, or she tries all of their porridge. She breaks things because she breaks Baby Bear's chair. And she takes a nap. And she actually tries out all of their beds before she settles on Baby Bear's bed. So, this is, when we write it like this, it's very clearly a summary of the story. Most of the time when people mistake plot for theme, because that's something that happens a lot, is you ask somebody for the theme and instead they give you something that happens in the story. This is pretty straight up a plot. But what if we wrote a summary that said something like, a girl learns not to go into strangers' houses. Sometimes people will see something like this and they'll think that they have a theme. Probably because it talks about this word right here. And we said that a theme was a message or a lesson that can be learned. And this little statement is saying something that the girl learned. And that's the key. It's not a theme because we are talking specifically about Goldilocks. That's the girl. And she's a specific girl in the story. And what she did in the story, she learned something. And so if we're talking about a girl in the story and what she does, we are talking about what happens in the story. We are not. This is not a theme. Okay? That's important. Plots are not themes. So once you've identified the plot and you've made sure that you understand what happens in the story, then the next thing you're going to do is you're going to examine topics found in the story. So that would be ideas. A topic is basically an idea found in the story. So topics get a little bit confusing because I've seen lots of people online or other places who should know what they're talking about, and they'll give a list of themes, and they'll say that a theme is something like love, or maybe family, or even something that sounds really meaningful, like the quest for purpose. That sounds meaningful, right? Theme-ish. However, each of these things, they are ideas. And remember that we said that in order for it to be a theme, it had to be a message. If I told you I had a secret message, if I gave you how about this? You go to open up a fortune cookie and all it said was love, wouldn't you want to know, well, what about love? Am I going to fall in love? Am I going to fall out of love? What's the story? That's because these are not messages. They are just ideas. So if we're going to turn these into turn these topics into themes, we have to say something about them. We might say, love stinks. Now we're saying something about love where we have composed a message that has something to do with love. This could be a theme. Love stinks could be a theme. So let's go back to our story of Goldilocks and the Three Bears. What are 3 topics from the story? Well, we have breaking and entering. We have personal integrity, because she doesn't show much. Oops, integrity. That's not done very well. And just for another one, we'll say we have a disregard for others. Most people, if they broke something in someone's house while they weren't home, they would probably turn around and run away right then. But nope, she goes ahead and takes it out. Okay, so here's 3 different ideas that are discussed or talked about in the story in some way, and none of them are themes yet because they're just ideas. They're just topics. So if we're going to take one and turn it into a theme, we're going to choose breaking and entering. Then the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go back to the plot. We're going to think about the plot. Well, this is what happens. At the end of the story, in some versions, the bears come home and eat her. In other versions, she runs screaming from the house because there's 3 bears staring at her when she wakes up. So we have this idea that she learns not to go into strangers' houses. And so we can take that and we can say, well, something that someone could learn from this story or the message might be that it isn't good to break into other people's houses. There you go. Now we have a message about our topic that's based on the plot. Now this message, if you look at it, we haven't said anything about Goldilocks or the bears or anything about the story whatsoever. This could apply to anyone. If you were walking down the street and you found a piece of paper with this written on it, you would look at that and you would say, oh, that's true. So not only do we have a message, but we have a message that is a universal truth. Probably isn't any country anywhere where it's okay to break into other people's houses and take their things or break their stuff. So that's how you get to your theme. So let's just go over our 3-step process one more time. Make a little list here so we know what we're doing. So we have our 3 steps. Finding theme. The first step is you identify and summarize the plot. You might just do the summarizing in your head, as long as you identify what it is and you know that you found it and you understand it. The second thing you're going to do is you're going to identify at least 2 topics in the story. That's because all stories have more than one theme for the most part, because all stories have more than one idea that they discuss. And if you find a couple, then it gives you more to work with. And the last thing you're going to do is you're going to consider one topic and the plot. So what happens in the story in regards to this topic. And you are going to write a sentence, a complete sentence explaining what the story says about the topic. Now, it's important that you write a complete sentence, because without a complete sentence, you probably don't have a theme. It has to be a complete thought. In order for something to be a message, like even though love stinks is very short, it's still a complete sentence. You have something is doing something. Love is stinking. That's a complete sentence. So the reason why I really like this method for finding theme is because the things people generally mistake for the theme are the plot and topics in the story. But when you go out of your way to identify the plot and to see what it is, then you're less likely to try to use it for the theme. And when you go from that and you pick topics, then you already know you're not done because you're only on step 2. And so the next thing to do would be to go to step 3 and to realize that you have to take that topic and you have to write a sentence that explains what the story says about the topic. And that is when you finally have your theme. So, good luck this week. If you have any problems, of course, you can email your teacher and get help with this, but hopefully that will clear it up and you can all use your 3-step process and this will go well.